It's something I haven't talked about a lot on the channel. I mean, I've done religion to death, I've done some on politics, but never, at least not that I can recall, have I ever really talked about my own personal philosophical positions. So I came across a way that might help us explore it. So let's do that. It's been quite a long time since I did one of these, but given some of what I've been talking about recently, and especially what I've been doing over on my blog, I figured why the heck not? So today, we're going to go through a quiz meant to identify some of my various philosophical positions, and we'll talk about some of the things that I accept and why I accept them. We'll also see why some of these things just aren't very useful, at least in my opinion. Now, this is likely to be pretty long, especially if you watch all these videos in a row, which I don't really recommend. So get comfortable and let's get going. So first, we get an overview, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading through it because it just doesn't matter. It does say that we'll learn 3 things at the bottom. We can learn what philosophical views I have, which may or may not be interesting. We can see if my answers compare to philosophy professors and other users, which most of the time I don't really care about, but that could be interesting to see too. Ultimately, it's just an appeal to authority and popularity, and yeah, big deal. I only care about how people justify their beliefs and not what beliefs they actually have. But whatever, we'll see that when it comes. And third, we can see what psychological traits say about my philosophical positions. And I don't know if that's going to be all that useful either, but I guess we'll take a look at it when we get there. Anyway, let's get started because there's a whole lot of questions to get through. Now, fair warning, I did skip over another page of explanation. You can certainly go back and read it if you want. As always, the link is in the description if you want to go take this for yourself. But there's going to be more than enough of me reading at you already, so let's not make it obnoxious, shall we? So let's get going. Question number 1. Abstract objects. Philosophers debate whether abstract objects exist, things like numbers. They are not physical objects, but some argue that there is also more than just a thought or idea in people's minds. They are supposed to be a third kind of thing that is neither physical nor mental. Now here's where I'm going to start off disagreeing, and you know me, I do this a lot, because the question as a whole isn't well defined. Abstract objects are real in the sense that they are electrochemical reactions that take place within the physical human brain. A number isn't something that you can hold, but it definitely is a brain state. Without the brain, the number simply doesn't exist. This is a question that actually doesn't have a valid answer for me to choose from. I can say that they exist because as a brain state, they are demonstrable, they are something that takes place within objective reality, but that actually doesn't have something that I can pick from. I can also say they don't exist because they're just a mental concept. But mental concepts are by definition brain states, and those exist, so you can see the problem. Anyway, I'm going to go with the second, even though, if I have to be honest about it, neither of them really work for me. So there's a second page for all of these, so you'll know what's coming up going down the line, where it explains the answer, etc., etc. So it says that I'm a nominalist, which I don't think is actually accurate per se, based on what I said before. See, on the graph, there's Platonist, nominalist, and other. Well, how do you get an other result with only 2 options? This is kind of the problem that I have with a lot of these quizzes, and I know that's not something you can really get beyond in this format, but my answer isn't really covered by the options provided. Anyway, at the bottom, it has an explanation, so let's go down and read it. Explanation of this view. You think that only particular objects exist. Generalizations and abstractions are human inventions. Insofar as there are categories, you would say they are creations of mind or language. Abstract things are not distinct parts of reality. Instead, they are just our way of organizing around particular things. You think numbers are invented, not discovered. Now, I do agree with that, more or less. We made up numbers and language and a lot of other things because it was useful to us. If humans had never evolved, if the human concept of numbers had never existed, then none of this stuff would be there. There might be other concepts of numbers out there somewhere in the cosmos we just don't know, but those likewise only exist within the minds of the beings that made them up. So, I don't know what to make of that one, really. You let me know in the comments what you think. Anyway, that's one down. Let's keep going. On to number 2. Philosophy has much to say about what determines the nature of beauty. Some philosophers believe that all opinions on beauty and artistic value are equally correct, whereas other philosophers believe that there are objective truths about which things are beautiful or artistically valuable and which things are not. For those who believe in objective truths about beauty, there is much debate about who or what determines these truths. Well, this one is easy. Beauty is completely subjective. You only have to look at the various standards of beauty among various groups of humans around the world, both across the planet and throughout time. Like concepts, it's just something we made up. Of course, that makes me an aesthetic subjectivist. Duh! This is where I'd really love to know the justification for the objectivists, because I can see absolutely no rational reason to hold that view. And this really comes off as another instance of fifis over facts. Therefore, let's just skip to the bottom where it explains you believe that beauty and ugliness are subjective qualities. Whether something is beautiful depends on how it strikes you, but objective reality does not include any facts about beauty. By the same token, there is no way to tell who is right and who is wrong in a debate over artistic merit. But it's not just that we can never know for sure what is truly beautiful. Rather, the subjectivist thinks our aesthetic preferences have nothing to do with shared objective reality at all. There are no objective truths about aesthetic values like beauty. And I think that's a bit overstated, but kind of, maybe, sort of okay. Because there are a lot of reasons that humans find things beautiful, things that are programmed into us by evolution to benefit the continuation of the species. And that's why we tend to value symmetry and body types that appear healthy, because reproduction benefits from such things. Yet there are still cultures out there that see being grossly overweight as beautiful for completely different reasons, such as the knowledge that they have enough to eat and they therefore might produce decent offspring. Truth be told, this is another case where I'd probably be in the other part to some degree, because, it's starting to look like most of these questions are trying to shoehorn you into one or two options when there are a whole lot more out there. But anyway, let's keep moving on. Question 3. The external world. Philosophers debate whether the world is all in the mind, our collective minds, or perhaps in God's mind, or if it is a physical reality that we know about through science and observation. Some philosophers maintain it is impossible to know anything about reality since we can never experience reality directly. All we have are our own sense experiences. Now this one, again, is pretty simple. From every shred of evidence that we have at hand, and keep in mind, we can only go with the evidence that we actually have, not the evidence that we wish we had, not the evidence that would be really handy to have. We can only go with what we've got. But based on that evidence, the universe exists beyond our minds. Now, there's no way to beat the question of hard solipsism, but I've never seen anyone make a convincing case that it is anything more than it actually seems to be. So I'm going with the first one. And that makes me an external world realist. Most people agree with me. The ones who don't, and I've had my fair share of discussions with that kind of person, I really don't think they make any sense at all. They've spent way too much time watching movies. And this is kind of where I have a lot of problems with a lot of philosophy geeks. Because there are a lot of people who don't know how to get out of their own heads and live in the real world. They seem to think that if they can conceive an idea, it might be true. And that's stupid. It really, really is. These people have absolutely no interest in external verification for any of the crap that they come up with. And that's a problem. It really is. And I have yet to have any of them explain how that makes any sense whatsoever. But anyway, on to the explanation. You are not too worried about our knowledge of the external world. You're pretty certain it's there, and the skeptical worry that we can never know the world outside of our minds does not deeply trouble you. You trust in the functioning of the human body and its sensory capabilities to convey accurate information about the environment, and you trust science to explain how all of this is possible. Yeah, but I don't see why it should trouble me. I'm not saying that I trust the functioning of the human body. I'm saying we don't really have a choice, do we? We have to work with the tools that we actually have at our disposal. If you reject your own experience and the corroboratory experience of others, then you've got nothing. You can't even consider any other possibilities because your brain might not even be working. This is the same kind of problem that I have with the people who pretend that solipsism is reasonable. If solipsism is reasonable, then why do you keep acting like it isn't? Why do you behave in the real world like the real world is there? Why don't you believe like it would be consistent to believe if solipsism was actually a thing? Because none of them do. Not one. And the whole thing seems very self-delusory to me. So, yeah, I'm sticking with where I am until somebody can come up with a damn good reason to prove otherwise. Good luck on that. Now we're on to free will, and that's always fun. I already know what my answer here is. I'm a compatibilist, but we'll see. Free will is the ability to control our actions and be morally responsible for them. Determinism is the idea that the universe unfolds according to unchanging laws of nature, which could be the laws of physics or perhaps the will of God, which have determined the course of events in the universe from beginning to end. And I think it's very, very clear that we do have some form of free will, at least to a certain extent, and we can actually debate this for the specifics, but here we're just going to go with what we go with. I don't really understand the way that the hard determinists explain themselves because, as far as I'm concerned, it isn't even coherent. If you have no free will, then you have no capacity to even consider the question of free will in the first place. Therefore, this is a really simple question to answer. I picked the bottom one. And there you go. What'd I tell you? Off to the explanation then. You believe that we have free will, but you think that having free will is compatible with living in a deterministic universe. The freedom to choose is not a metaphysical power that breaks the laws of physics. Rather, freedom consists simply in the ability to do what you choose to do. Your choices might be predetermined, but they are yours nonetheless. If you had a different set of beliefs and desires, then you would have made different choices and done different things. Free will means that you make the choices you do and can be held responsible for those choices because you are you. Now, I don't think that's particularly well stated at all. In fact, it's kind of ridiculous. There are plenty of things that you can't choose to do. I can't decide to just flap my arms and fly. Your choices are restricted to those things that are actually possible within the context of your current situation. But that's kind of a quibble, I suppose, because when you're talking about free will with the determinists and that kind of people, that's not usually the kind of things that come up. In fact, when I'm talking to determinists, and this goes for solipsists too, it works the same way, My first question is usually, why are you having this conversation? Because neither of us have a choice. I don't know. I've never heard a decent response to that. If you have one, let me know in the comments. Anyway, I'm really interested in being accurate, so I had to say it, but, let's just move on. So here's one of probably many places we start running into problems because they're trying to put people into boxes that don't necessarily exist. Question 5. God is usually regarded as an all-powerful deity or multiple deities, worshipped as the creator or ruler of the universe, or as rulers of particular forces of nature or ancestral principles, yada yada yada. However, many individuals question or deny the existence of God, seeing it as incompatible with various aspects of the world as we understand it, or seeing it as something that is impossible to determine. It also says that if you are agnostic, pick the one that fits best. Except this is exactly why I did a long series of posts over on my blog about the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on atheism and agnosticism. I fundamentally disagree with their entire take on the thing. Of course, as I'm reading this, that hasn't even posted on my blog yet. That'll come up pretty soon. Yet, this is the beginning of April, and I don't expect this video to hit YouTube until sometime at the end of June, but at least you'll have something to go look at if you're interested, and the whole thing will be there. Anyway, I'm going with God not existing because no evidence that we actually have access to even remotely suggests that any of them do. Well, duh, it says I'm an atheist. Of course, I'd still be an atheist even if I'd taken the agnostic route because most agnostics are actually also atheists. It's absurd that the philosophers don't seem to be able to wrap their minds around the concepts of being both these things at the same time. Anyway, on to the explanation. You might believe that there is no supreme being, no all-powerful, all-knowing, maximally good, and benevolent creator of the universe. You might believe that the idea of God's existence is absurd, or you might have what you take to be a conclusive argument for the denial of God's existence. The difference between an atheist and an agnostic is confidence about the claim to knowledge of God's non-existence. So you're only an atheist if you are confident that God doesn't exist. Bullshit! That's absolutely not true. I don't claim to have knowledge, period. That's why I'm an agnostic. There is no evidence that God exists whatsoever. Any gods of any kind, period. And there's also no evidence that gods don't exist. Non-existent things don't leave evidence of their own non-existence. That's how reality works. There is only the fact that I am an evidentialist. I have no clue if that might come up later. I don't know. Could be. I don't know. I haven't read that far. But it means that you don't believe things without evidence to support them, which, as far as I'm concerned, ought to describe every human being on the planet. The fact that it doesn't is abjectly pathetic. So anyway, dumb question. Badly worded, but hey, there you go. Now we're on to knowledge claims. Now I touched on this briefly a second ago, but let's see if we can expand on it. It's one word, but it potentially has multiple meanings. Knowledge. In epistemology alone, it's common to distinguish among three kinds of knowledge. Whether you know how to do something, know a person, or know a fact. Could this knowledge mean the same thing in every situation? Well, as far as I'm concerned, knowledge must be demonstrable and supported. In philosophy, knowledge is often defined as justifiable true belief. And I can go with that, that's fine. If so, though, then how you justify it and how you determine that it is in fact true, that matters. And I see an awful lot of people who can't do that with any of their positions. And that's why religious faith isn't knowledge. It's belief. It's faith based on emotions and not on evidence. It has nothing at all to do with what is demonstrably true in the real world. And I think that demonstration is very, very important. Therefore, even though I disagree with the wording of the question, I'm going with the third option because generally justified true belief must remain justified and true. And according to them, that makes me an invariantist, which I guess is fine. But again, this was not a well-asked question, and in any reasonable conversation, being forced down a particular road, that shouldn't be permitted to happen. I am talking about a very strict meaning of knowledge, not the way that it gets used in popular parlance. This is a language problem, not a philosophical one. Remember, language is descriptive, it's not prescriptive, and language is always evolving and changing, and people can and do use it loosely. Because if I'm using a single definition of the word throughout, then I'm probably wrong according to the way most other people are using it. Context matters, it always has, and it always will. Anyway, the explanation says, the meaning of knowledge is invariant. That is, it does not vary. This view is opposed to contextualism, which maintains that knowledge refers to different cognitive states depending on the circumstances in which it is used. But yeah, since I'm the one defining how I'm using the word, how does any of that actually matter? This is supposed to be about the nature of knowledge and the nature of knowledge claims. It isn't about how people may use the same word to mean a bunch of different things in different contexts. The whole idea of that is just stupid. If someone says that they know Elvis, I'm going to expect them to be able to produce the same kind of evidence to justify their claims, including evidence that Elvis is still alive, that I would for any scientific claim or religious claim or any other claim for that matter. So, yeah, I'm really not impressed with this question, sorry. So that's where we're going to cut it for the day, lest it gets too ridiculously long. And keep in mind, I've written all of these, and if I just let it roll, it would be well over an hour long. The way I'm looking at it at the moment, this is going to go 3 videos, and I'm not going to do them all together because, yeah, that would drive people crazy and burn their brains. But they will show up over the coming weeks, and I do hope that you enjoy it. I'd really like to see what you have to say, though. Therefore, ta-da! The comments are open. Have at it. Do you agree, disagree, have any further questions or want clarifications? Go ahead and ask, and you know I'll answer. I don't know that anything in this first section was terribly controversial, but who knows? There were a lot that I didn't agree with. There were a lot that were badly worded. There were a lot that were downright stupid, but nothing really controversial, I don't think. What bothers me most about a lot of these quizzes, and I know there really isn't a lot that can be done about it, but it's the fact that it only allows you to go down certain, specific, well-defined paths, and if you don't really fit into any of them, you're kind of boned. There is almost no room for nuance, and that's often absolutely required. Yes, this is just a stupid online quiz, and therefore it's not at all important in the grand scheme of things, but I still find that troubling, at least to me. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, and as always, I'll be there. If there's one thing that these quizzes are usually good for, it's sparking a lively conversation. So let's go do that. You go first. So it's off to the philosophy races once again, as we look at some more questions on a philosophy quiz, just to get some insight into some of the views that I hold, if anybody actually cares. Will any of that be worthwhile? Will the questions be coherent? I don't know, but the only way to find out is to keep watching. We're back once again with some philosophical questions on a quiz that I found online. How will I respond? Well, who the hell knows? Of course, what's really important is how you justify these things, and I found, unfortunately, that there are a lot of people out there, even trained philosophers, who don't seem to know how they actually justify any of their positions. It all seems to be a whole lot of fee-fee nonsense, if you know what I mean. So let's go look at a couple more and see how, at least I think, this ought to be done. So we start off with the laws of nature. Some philosophers regard laws of nature as fundamental principles that govern the nature of reality. They explain why things happen in the way that they do. Other philosophers regard laws of nature as mere interpretations of observable phenomena that allows us to make accurate predictions about the world. These professors are skeptical that fundamental principles which explain the regularities of the universe actually exist. And in my opinion, at least, this isn't even a philosophical question. I don't care what philosophers think. And that's one thing that pisses a lot of philosophers off. I don't care what you think just because you label yourself a philosopher. I care what you think if it makes any rational sense. And way too many, they just don't. So the way that I'm going to be reading this is, do we believe that the laws of nature are absolute, or are they just interpretations that we've laid on them based on our own personal observations? And that takes us right back to justified true belief, which I talked about in the last video. How do you justify your positions objectively? The fact that you've never found a black swan, that doesn't mean that there are no black swans. The fact that our observations seem pretty decent, that doesn't mean that they're absolutely correct. In fact, we've been wrong a lot in the past, and we could be wrong right now. It seems to be more about what level of confidence you place on your position, and frankly, it should only be as much confidence as you have data and an eye to historical reality. It's the best that we can do at the moment based on what we know right now and absolutely nothing more. Therefore, I'm going to go with the first, and it makes absolutely no sense to me at all to even consider the second. And the results just show that people are idiots. Now, this is really very common in my experience. We see it in religion all the time. It's people being inordinately impressed with their own intelligence, so to speak, to the point that they only count the hits and completely ignore the misses, because, it makes them happy to think they've got a good beat on things. That doesn't mean that we do, and your emotional state says absolutely nothing about the actual condition of reality. Anyway, the explanation says, Hume famously argued that there are no necessary connections between events. Causation is imaginary. It's a fiction we cannot help but believe in out of habit, because doing so helps us organize our experience of changes in the world. Yeah, but I didn't say that. The question didn't say that. Obviously, there is cause and effect in the observable universe. I don't know where they're going with this one, sorry, but yeah, I'm not buying it. And here's one that I've personally been looking forward to: metaethics. As everyone knows, I'm a moral anti-realist. I did a very large multi-part exploration of moral realism over on my blog, and I'll put a link to the first part in the description if you want to go look at it. And the only people who had the guts to say anything, they ran away the second that it became clear that I didn't accept their fallacious arguments. So let's get through this one because I like this. Metaethics is the branch of philosophy that investigates what morality is, including moral thought, words, and practices. It's an interesting field to debate, as we all have views on what's right and what's wrong. But the problem is, I don't think it's that interesting, because everybody I run into on the moral realist side, they seem completely incapable of evaluating from a rationalist viewpoint. It's all purely emotional, and as far as I'm concerned, that is not at all worthwhile. So clearly, I'm going to pick the second option, that morality is purely subjective and a product of cultural and personal belief. If you want to know more about this, I'll link to the first article on my blog in the description, and by all means, go take a look. And I think the results really tell you all you need to know about the quality of thinking of a lot of philosophers. I have yet to find a single one of them who, when I asked for evidence for their ideas, They didn't just run away. They didn't just make excuses and say, well, I can't answer that. No, you have to be able to provide evidence. You need to be able to show that the way objective reality works, that is coherently linked to the ideas that you have in your head. And that's not how any of these people ever work. These people are so busy noodling their navels that they've lost all grasp on objective reality. And that's just sad. This is more evidence that far too many philosophers and philosophy fanboys are only in it for the emotions, at least in my opinion. It makes it look a whole lot like religion, though, doesn't it? And if you think I'm wrong, by all means, feel free to produce evidence that backs your side up. The comments are open. Go right ahead. From all the experience that I've had, which is pretty extensive, they can't. They don't even try, because evidence is scary, just like it is to the religious. Somebody, please show me that your beliefs are both true and justified. Go right ahead. Anyway, now the explanation, it really sounds like it's trying to make a bunch of excuses. Maybe you're an empiricist. Yeah, and? Because again, if you follow any other position, back it up for me. Show me that you can actually get to demonstrable reality in your view. I don't care what you feel, I care what you can prove. And let's be honest, I don't think that you can. I think this has been done to death, though, and I don't think it really says many good things about a lot of philosophy geeks, so, yeah, let's just move on. Question number 9. The mind. Philosophers have often wondered if the states and processes of the mind are identical to states and processes of the brain. While we may use the words mind and brain interchangeably at times, let's look into whether we should. Because the mind and the brain are one, whether you like it or not. When you alter the physical brain, you automatically alter the mind. If the brain is damaged, the mind is damaged too. When the brain dies, there is no evidence of any kind at all that the mind survives. You actually have to prove otherwise, and nobody remotely can. And that's why I'm picking the first option. It doesn't matter what you want to be true. It matters only what you can demonstrate actually is. And of course, that makes me a physicalist. Duh. It's where 100% of the evidence that we actually have at hand points. And this is where I piss off a whole lot of philosophers, because I won't restrict my thinking to just philosophy. I expect philosophy and science to intermingle. And they don't like that. It's why I ask them for evidence, because without evidence, the crap in their heads doesn't automatically become true. And they don't like that, do they? But anyway, we get down to the explanation, which reads, you believe the mind is a physical thing. You probably think everything is physical. If something exists, then it must be part of the physical world. So the mind must be part of the physical world. Some physicalist views postulate that the mind is identical with the brain. Other physicalist views postulate that the mind is functionally related to the brain, like how computer software is functionally realized by computer hardware. According to the second view, the mind and the brain are not identical, but the mind is still physical. You definitely do not believe in a soul. Yeah, because there's no evidence for anything but the physical. There just isn't. We have nothing but the physical reality in which we live. And if you'd like to postulate otherwise, present your evidence. Go ahead. And this is where this starts to look a whole lot like religion. It's a whole lot of, well, it makes me feel good to think that this, and this. I don't care about your feelings. Screw your stupid feelings. Grow up and find evidence. You can't get there without evidence to support you. If you want it to be justified and true, you have to have evidence. You can't just sit there and noodle your navel like a frickin' idiot. I don't give a crap about your emotions. Grow the hell up. On to moral judgment. Philosophers debate the function of moral statements in our language. When we make a claim about what's right and what's wrong, are we making statements that have the potential to be universal, for example, that can be true or false? Or do such claims merely express our feelings? Yeah, except they really don't. I don't care what you think has the potential to be right or wrong. I care what you can demonstrate to objectively be right or wrong, and in fact to even define that right and wrong has any meaning objectively at all. And so far, nobody has come up with a coherent way to get from one to the other. Now, we can have a very long discussion about why things like moral realism are just stupid and inherently indefensible, but I don't even see how somebody could go about backing them up with evidence that we actually currently have at hand. Again, you can't just say that it's true because you really want it to be true. You have to be able to back that up in some objective way. They're doing no better a job than the religious are, because you notice these things are starting to look an awful lot alike. The problem here is that both of these options are valid. Subjective moral judgments do express our beliefs about what we purport to be moral facts. That doesn't mean that they are moral facts. That doesn't mean that they are objectively true. It means we really like the idea, and that doesn't matter. The second is true, though. Our beliefs express our emotions and our desires about supposed moral facts, not that there really are any. Therefore, I'm really unable to pick one because both are true to a degree, and both of them are false to a degree. This is another place that I'm going to fall into the other category. Therefore, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick the first one because it's on top, with the understanding that I don't really agree with either position as written. And here we get a follow-up question, and no, I don't think that there are any moral claims that are true in the sense that they are justified, objectively verifiable facts. They're all opinions, so I'm still going to go with no. And this is kind of the problem, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot in the comments because this always comes up, but this is the problem where I don't think that the moral realists, the people who think that there actually are objective moral truths out there, I don't think they've actually thought this through. Because all you have to do is look at the real world in which we live. All you have to do is look at cultures other than your own, and you will see people there who believe things, apparently just as strongly as you do, that are diametrically opposed to the things that you believe. You will see people who say, well, throwing gay people off roofs is A-okay, and in fact it's commanded by God. Well, we don't think that. We think that's morally abhorrent. Well, okay. Then where are you getting this objective moral truth from? Because apparently there's some disagreement to that. But these people don't want to talk about that because these people are lost in their own heads. That's a problem, and it's a problem you people need to actually think about and justify. So we finally get to the last screen. This makes me, of course, a cognitivist, which I don't agree with, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's get to the explanation. A cognitivist thinks moral beliefs are about reality, which they are, and can be either true or false. Subjectively speaking, sure. Moral realists are cognitivists, but I'm not a moral realist. They think that some moral beliefs are objectively true, which I don't think. But being a cognitivist doesn't entail having any particular beliefs about what is right or wrong. Even if you think all moral beliefs are false, you are still a cognitivist because you think that moral beliefs can be objectively false. A cognitivist believes moral judgments are meaningful statements about a situation in the world. Yeah, but I don't think any of them are. Now, granted, I did just pick one out of the hat, so I can only blame myself for that. But I don't agree with any of that whatsoever. Everything is inherently subjective because we just made it up because it makes us happy. And I don't give a crap about that. I just don't see how you could ever get to a rational position that any of these things are actually true, or false for that matter. I don't get it, and no one has been able to explain it to me so far. By the way, comments are open. Go ahead and try it for yourself if you want. Moral realists just really like the idea of an objective morality, just like the religious like the idea of a moral reality, because it takes all the pressure off of them. You don't have to think about your own moral positions when they're just sitting there in black and white. You just have to blindly follow them like a frickin' idiot. And if you want to see examples of that, go over to YouTube and watch channels like, I don't know, The Transformed Wife, where you get to see somebody willingly being a slave to her husband because the Bible says so. These people are morons. They really are. And it's not limited to the religious, by the way. And that makes it an inherently lazy position to take. I'm not convinced if asking if moral statements are right or wrong is even coherent. Right or wrong according to who? And make sure you have evidence for that one too. Because if there is a who involved at all, then objectivity goes right out the window. Objectivity, by definition, requires that no mind be involved, period. That's people, that's gods, that's anything. It has to exist beyond all minds. It has to be completely mind independent. Demonstrate any case at all, where this is the case for morals. That would be funny to see, wouldn't it? And this is where we start to have problems. There is a prospective discussion going on at the moment, which may turn into a full-on debate, I don't know, on moral realism. And I keep catching the philosopher on the other side trying to hide behind navel-noodling nonsense when that just doesn't get you anywhere objective. If your position addresses the way that things actually operate in objective reality, then you can't just hide behind syllogisms. You actually have to present evidence for your case. You actually need to be able to justify it in some kind of a demonstrable way. And that's not how philosophy works. All the philosophy in the world won't tell you a thing about a new species of wombat. It is not the right tool for the job at hand. Yet there are plenty of people out there who are convinced that philosophy answers all questions, when in effect it just bamboozles their opponents with BS. The proper response to claims presented with no demonstrable corroboration is, prove it. Prove it. This is why I ask the questions that I do. How do you know that? And how do you back it up? How have you verified it in any objectively demonstrable way to see if what you're claiming is actually correct? And these people can't do that. Philosophy has no independent, objective evidence to present. It's just more and more and more words, none of which can be shown to be true without going beyond philosophy. And that's why the religious love philosophical arguments. It's easy to dazzle people with bullcrap. But what if you don't buy into the bullcrap in the first place? That's a question for you, and one they don't have any answers for. Then they have nothing else that they can say. Far too often, you'll get them going, "But you just don't understand." Yeah, who else says that? The religious, of course. What else is new? Because these people tend to only talk to their supporters, people who are already on their side for emotional reasons. And I think we all know what my take on overt emotionalism is, right? It's a complete waste of time. Anyway, we're going to cut it here because, yeah, this could potentially get very long and, why not? So I'll be back with the last part of this and hopefully it might get somewhere useful. I wouldn't be holding my breath, but hey, we'll see, won't we? Hey, I got a question for you. Do you believe in zombies? I mean, if you do, you really need some electroshock therapy, but hey, maybe you can just become a philosopher. Because that's the kind of thing that we're going to get into today, and Yeah, that's really kind of stupid if you ask me. But we're not strangers to stupidity around here, are we? Therefore, into the fray we go. Today, we're going to finish up the last of the What's Your Philosophy quiz. And I wish I could say that we've saved the best for last, but nope, we haven't. Because today, we're going to have some problems, and I'll talk about that at the very end. This is where I really start to think that philosophers just like to hear themselves talk, but they really don't have a whole lot of substance to say. In that, it starts to sound a whole lot like religion, doesn't it? So, anyway, let's just get to it. Therefore, next up on the agenda, we're off to Newcomb's problem. This is where I'm really going to start balking. Theoretical questions like this don't actually mean anything. Well, imagine you're a kumquat. Yeah, screw you. This, like a lot of philosophical questions, is meant to shoehorn you into a binary position and, no, I'm not going to play along. Imagine you're on a futuristic game show. What do you do? Well, I quit and walk out. I don't play. This is making all kinds of stupid assertions that, honestly, I can't even take seriously enough to bother to consider. Imagine that there's magic. Yeah, pass. Therefore, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick one because I just don't care. I'll go with the second one in this case because I think last time in the last episode, I went for the first, and we're just going to move on. Now, I'm only going to show this because A, you're here and you want to see it, and B, it displays the problems with this kind of quiz. The majority of philosophers don't hold to either view, and I started out in the very first video pointing this kind of stuff out. But you can't get there from this quiz. If you go down to the user responses, other is 0 because it just can't be chosen. Well, then what the hell is the point of having an other? If they can't figure out a way not to railroad the people who are taking the quiz, then it should never have been included in the first place. So this is just stupid, and it shows the problem with all of these quizzes. But we're just going to move on. Next, we get to normative ethics, and this isn't going to go well either if I'm reading this right. Normative ethics explores how one ought to act. Unlike metaethics or moral judgment, normative ethics looks into what makes an action right based on asking what everyone should do in that circumstance. Except, I don't really think that there is an ought that we can universally apply. Any given situation is going to have a lot of possible answers and potential nuance that makes trying to impose a single answer absurd from the start. What makes an action right? Because I don't think right and wrong are even a thing that can be objectively evaluated. Morality is 100% subjective in every single situation. What might be right for me to do in a particular situation might be completely wrong for you based on your experiences, your goals, the culture that you live in, etc., etc., etc. I'm going to pick causing good effects because that's something that I've chosen subjectively. But what is a good effect? How do you define good in this context? Because that's another completely subjective thing to do. And that doesn't make this the right answer because there is no right answer. Someone else might choose a different goal. And that just makes this whole thing a complete mess. Now, that makes me a consequentialist according to the study. But you notice how low all of the options are, right? There is no agreement on any of this, period. We can go down to the explanation, though, and I'll rip that one apart, too. You think that the rightness or wrongness of an act is a matter of what effects that action has. Right actions cause good outcomes, and wrong actions cause bad outcomes. When evaluating the goodness or badness of an event, it doesn't matter what the intentions of the actors were. The problem is, I don't think we can get universal agreement on what effects any action causes or what goals we should have. Even if we do pick a goal subjectively, like well-being, you're not going to get everybody to agree on how we should get there or even what that goal means. This is desperately trying to get to an objective moral end in a world that is inherently subjective. Like I said, this is just a complete mess. It's just not going to get us anywhere. Off to politics. This isn't a question that will cover your political view based on modern political issues and opinions today, but rather the political philosophy of how you think society should be. Well, here's my answer. Who cares? Preferable to who? And why do you think that person matters? What difference does my opinion make at all? And that's really what needs to be asked for most of these questions. How do we get to objective truth, and how pointless are most of these questions? So, what kind of society do I think would be most preferable? What difference does it make? Slave owners in the antebellum South thought that slavery was great, because for them, having free labor in the fields and thinking that their silly religion was true and having somebody to feel superior to, that was a great thing for them to consider. And the same goes for the Nazis. The German people were downtrodden following the end of World War I, and they really needed someone to feel like they were superior to. Welcome to the Holocaust. This is something that can't even be considered without context, and context is the furthest thing in any of these questions. Just because I can look at the context with which I am most familiar and make a choice that seems subjectively correct to me, that doesn't mean a thing to somebody who lives in an entirely different world. Therefore, what's the point of answering this question at all? Therefore, the second one, I guess, seems to be the best, so I'm just going to go with it arbitrarily. But that doesn't mean that it's a one-size-fits-all answer. So we move on to the explanation, and of course, this is the very basis of egalitarianism. But you notice that, again, the majority of philosophers went with another view. You can get to all of those positions by just pursuing egalitarianism, which makes the others rather pointless in my opinion. You think that fundamentally people are equal in very important ways, and recognition of this fact would give us pause when confronted with systems that distribute benefits and burdens in an unequal way, unless those unequal distributions have very good justification. So, for example, if a system awards significantly more wealth to some than others, you may be likely to question this system. But that's not really true, though, is it? It doesn't matter if everyone is equal, so long as they are treated equal, so that the best can rise to the top, and the worst can, do something else. People need to be able to perform to their level of competence, not because they just happen to be there. It's equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, that's important. And there's an awful lot of political systems out there that can't get that through their stupid little heads. What is the purpose of science? The philosophy of science looks into the foundations, methods, and implications of science, and there is plenty of debate on whether science can reveal the truth about inobservable things. The purpose of science is to learn stuff about the real world. It's not that hard. It's to separate what we wish was true from what is actually true. Because here's the thing. I don't know that there are any unobservable things. There are certainly things that we haven't observed yet. There are things that we can't observe because we haven't developed the methods to observe them, but that doesn't mean that they are inherently impossible to see or study or whatever. We continually learn more and more and more about the world, but I don't think that there's anything out there that can never, ever be observed, never be discovered, never be found or proven or whatever. Science is the only consistently reliable tool that we have ever seen to date, to the eternal disappointment of the overly emotional and gullible and religious. So the question becomes, what's more accurate about science? And here I have to quibble again. I don't think that there is any ultimate truth of reality. Reality just is what it is. That's it. Are we ever going to know everything that there is to know about reality? That's highly unlikely. That's just life. We are inherently limited human beings. That's the way it goes. Every time that we answer a question, we find more questions that we have to ask. We are incrementally getting better, but will we ever know it all? I don't think so. And I figure this is another place where I'm going to wind up firmly in the other camp. But for the moment, I'll just pick the first one. Well, at least I got shanghaied into good company. I still don't think that we're ever going to know it all. I think that's an irrational goal. We are an inherently limited species, and sooner or later, we're going to go extinct, just like everything else. Welcome to the real world. At least the explanation might help a little. You think scientific theories approximately tell us how the world really is. You probably believe that most well-supported scientific theories are at least approximately true. Sure, I guess. I don't know that there is any capital T truth here, but our observations and ideas keep getting a little closer to the way reality seems to be every time we make observations. Moreover, you think that the theoretical elements of our best science refer to real things in the world. So, for example, even though we cannot directly observe electrons, you believe they exist because our best scientific theories tell us that they do. Except we can. I mean, we might not be able to do it with our own physical eyes, but we can construct machines where we absolutely can, quote unquote, see them. There's a lot of things that my body can't detect that we know are actually true about the universe. Being blind doesn't make the world go away. So a lot of this is really just dumb. Okay, this one was so completely unimpressive that I didn't even bother to take a screenshot. And unfortunately, the way this whole thing works is you can't go back to look at it again. So take that as you will. It's about whether a Star Trek transporter kills you and then just recreates you elsewhere. Who cares? This is another one of those purely hypothetical questions, and I'm sorry, but I really don't want to answer hypothetical questions. Now, there is an answer, and I will get to that in a second, but this is just noodling your navel level of Star Wars versus Star Trek nonsense. It's philosophical masturbation, and I see no reason to take part. So, in this, I'm going to go with the first one, mostly just because, but I'm going to explain why I actually understand the question down below. So, let's go see. Philosophers are interested in discussing what truth is a property of and what you mean when you say something is true. One of the first questions they explore is, what is truth? Well, as far as I'm concerned, truth is getting as close to reality as you possibly can. Truth, as I said before, is justified true belief. You can't get anywhere close to truth without some kind of corroboratory evidence. Therefore, while the first one gets a nod, I'm fine with it, but let's explain this a little bit. Because here's the reality. The complaints that a lot of people have with the whole transporter thing is, well, your body is destroyed and then it's recreated over there. And even though it looks exactly identical to the one you had with all the same memories, etc., well, it's all new atoms, so it can't be you. Except in reality, your body replaces atoms all the time. What you were like when you were born is nothing like you are like when you die. Your body has completely replaced every single atom that you've got with new atoms. So does that mean that you have died multiple times during your life by just being alive? Because that's what makes this question stupid. stupid because it's people who don't understand how reality works. All right, I'm getting too worked up over this stupid question, so let's keep going. Correspondence truth. What works for me? You think truth is a relationship between reality and a representation of it. Truth is not identical with reality itself, according to this view. Rather, truth exists within sentences, brain states, and other representations of reality considered accurate. For those who agree with the correspondence theory, truth is a connection with the world that reality exists out there, independent of our ability to know or think about it. Yeah, I don't really agree with that. It really feels like the author is trying to downplay this view, and I don't buy it. Of course, I completely reject anyone's reliance on emotion, which I think is what's going on here, but whatever. Let's just keep going on. There has to be an end to it somewhere, I hope. Yeah, hard pass on the fantasy nonsense. I'm not even going to read it. This is just stupid. Zombies aren't real. What's the point of even addressing this? What's next? You're somebody who believes that unicorns might exist. Are you really that stupid? This is the kind of thing that I mean when I say that noodling your navel without context gets you absolutely nowhere. Anybody who thinks that there are, or even could be, Romero-style zombies running around out there someplace, you need to get your head examined. And this is really the kind of thing about philosophy that just makes me roll my eyes. Because this is just a waste of time. It really is. It gets you nowhere remotely close to reality. And reality ought to be the goal here. Unfortunately for a lot of people, it's not, but it should be. That's why we do science, because science, we hope, incrementally gets us a little bit closer to the way things are actually working every time we use it. And then we get a little closer and a little closer and a little closer until we've got a reasonable understanding of the way things probably work. Could we be wrong? Sure. But we've got to go with what we've got, and we can't just say, well, if we're not absolutely perfect all the time, well, we shouldn't even try, because that's stupid. So this whole thing is just, I don't know. You tell me. The comments are open. Go ahead. Well, that was it. It wants me to give an email address to get the results, but yeah, no thanks. I'm not going to give any help to the spammers, so I guess we don't get to find out anything about my psychological traits. I don't need to be on anybody else's mailing list. I'm already on enough. Actually, I did figure out if you hit submit and don't put an address in there, it does give you some information, and I might cover that in another video because, yeah, this whole thing is getting way too long already, and I'm not in the mood at the moment. So anyway, what do you think? Did you disagree with any of my answers? Let me know in the comments. I do have to point out the absurdity of some of these questions, though, because what's the point of even asking about zombies and other nonsensical things that have absolutely zero meaning in the real world? It's like seriously debating the Force or how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. If you want to do that as a fanboy, maybe, I guess, I don't know. If you got the time to waste, go ahead. But if you're doing it as an academic and being serious about it, don't. Stop being an idiot. You're just embarrassing yourself. Anyway, I'm going to go take a rest because I'm really sick of talking. I'd love to have some in-depth, rational discussions with people when I come back, but that usually doesn't work out so well with people who would ask if there were zombies. Anyway, the comments are open. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time.